There's something eerie about waking up on your birthday to silence. Not just the kind of silence that lingers in the early hours of the morning, but a thick, deliberate kind. The kind that hums just beneath your skin and makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It was a Thursday, and I remember the morning light slicing to the blinds in razor-thin lines across the living room floor. I sat there on the couch, barefoot, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee that tasted more bitter than usual. Maybe it was the anticipation. Maybe it was the absence. Her name was Sabrina, my wife of 7 years, partner in crime, best friend, or at least that's what I'd thought. She had left early that morning, a rush kiss on the forehead, murmuring something about an important client meeting downtown before disappearing into the haze of the day. She promised we'd celebrate that weekend, promised it with a quick smile and an even quicker turn of her keys in the ignition. The house felt bigger than usual after she left. The echo of her heels still seemed to tap against the hardwood, long after the door had slammed shut. I scrolled through my phone, expecting the usual happy birthday texts. A few trickled in. My mother, my brother, an old college roommate. Nothing from her. I shrugged it off. She's busy. Important client. Big meeting. To kill the time, I took a walk around the neighborhood. It was a kind of quiet suburb where every house looked just a little too perfect. The kind of place where secrets hid in manicured lawns and white picket fences. Kids' bikes scattered on driveways. Dogs barking lazily behind fences. Sprinklers clicking rhythmically. Life moved on, oblivious. I returned to an empty house. By noon, I figured she'd at least send a text. Maybe a quick love you, happy birthday. Nothing. I told myself to be patient. It's just one day. Besides, we had plans for Saturday night. Dinner reservations at Lucille's, the fancy little place she loved but always said was too much for a normal night. She had booked it herself 2 weeks ago. I'd even caught her giggling to herself while scrolling through the menu online. So I waited. I flipped on the TV. Mindless news programs and game shows droned on while I lay sprawled across the couch. At some point, I must have dozed off because when I blinked back into awareness, the sun was already dipping low, casting long, golden shadows through the blinds. Still no Sabrina. Still no text. It was 6 p.m. when I finally called her. Straight to voicemail. Hey, babe. I said, try and keep the edge out of my voice. Just wondering when you'll be home. Hope everything's going well. Call me when you can. I hung up and stared at the phone like it might ring if I glared hard enough. It didn't. At 7:30, I ordered a pizza. Happy birthday to me. I ate 2 slices and shoved the box onto the coffee table. Appetite lost. The more minutes ticked by, the more I started noticing little things. The way her framed photos on the wall seemed to mock me with their frozen smiles. The stack of unopened mail on the counter. The scent of her perfume still lingering faintly in the hallway. All the traces of a life built together, suddenly feeling foreign. By 9 p.m., I had stopped pretending I wasn't angry. I poured a generous glass of whiskey and sat back down on the couch, pulling up my phone again. Still no messages. And that's when I did something I don't usually do. I opened Instagram. It started innocently enough. Mindless scrolling. Photos of friend vacations, babies, brunches, until something caught my eye. A post, not from Sabrina, but from one of her co-workers. A boomerang video, that familiar loop of laughter and clinking glasses. Sabrina was in the background, smiling wide, wearing that red dress, the one she knew drove me crazy, a glass of champagne in her hand. The caption read, "Best night ever, #celebrate #downtown vibes." My stomach twisted. I tapped the video, watched it again, slower this time. Sabrina laughing. Sabrina clinking glasses with someone, a man I didn't recognize. His hand grazing the small of her back in a way that was way too familiar. I sat there for a long time, phone heavy in my hand, the video looping over and over until it seared itself into my brain. She wasn't in a meeting. She wasn't stuck at work. She was downtown, celebrating, and I wasn't invited. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the flicker of the TV long forgotten. My mind kept replaying that video on a loop, her smile, that champagne glass, the stranger's hand. At some point, sometime around 3 a.m, I decided to do what I had promised myself I never would. I started digging. I scrolled back through her co-worker's feed, my thumb moving automatically, almost attached. There were more pictures. Group shots at a rooftop bar. Drinks lined up on polished tables. Sabrina laughing, leaning a little too close to the same guy in picture after picture. It didn't take long to find his name. Darren Lewis. A quick search told me he was a business development manager at the same company Sabrina worked at. Handsome, confident, exactly the type of guy who looked like he'd be at ease, sliding his hand onto the small of a married woman's back. I closed the app and tossed my phone onto the coffee table, disgusted with myself, disgusted with her, disgusted with how easy it had been to find it all. By sunrise, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. She had lied to me without blinking. She had planned it all down to the important meeting excuse. If I pushed too soon, she'd have another lie ready. No, I needed to know more. Needed to be sure. The weekend passed like molasses, every minute dripping slow and heavy. Sabrina came home late Friday night, all apologies about crazy deadlines and bosses being tyrants. She kissed my cheek, ruffled my hair like I was a child, and went straight to bed. Not once did she mention my birthday. Saturday night came. Our supposed celebration night. At 5 p.m., I was dressed and ready. A clean shirt, nice shoes, even that ridiculous cologne she bought me last Christmas. I sat in the living room, pretending to watch TV, waiting for her to say, "Let's go." She came downstairs an hour later, wearing sweatpants and one of my old college hoodies, hair piled messily on top of her head. "Hey," she said, yawning. "I am so wiped. Can we just do a movie night here instead? Order some Thai food." I stared at her, feeling like an idiot in my button-down and polished shoes. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. "Whatever you want." Because it was easier than asking the obvious. She flopped down onto the couch, scrolling through Netflix like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't shattered something sacred just days earlier. I ordered the food. We ate. We watched some forgettable action movie. And when she fell asleep halfway through, head on my shoulder, I sat there in the flickering blue light, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The next week, I started paying closer attention. Patterns emerged. Tuesday nights, she worked late. Thursday evenings, she had team meetings. Friday, client events. Each time, she left dressed a little nicer than usual. Each time, she came back a little more tired, a little less interested in talking. I made a mental list of all the red flags I had missed, all the moments I'd excused, brushed off, laughed away. And slowly, methodically, I built my case. I made it a point to be busy too. Drinks with coworkers. Late night work emergencies. She never questioned it. Never batted an eye. She was too wrapped up in her own lies to notice mine. It was almost too easy. Then came the night I decided to follow her. She left the house around 7 p.m., claiming she had volunteered to help with a charity event for work. I waited 5 minutes, grabbed my keys, and followed her car at a distance. She drove downtown, past the office buildings, past the restaurants, to a sleek little boutique hotel I'd never heard of before. She pulled into the underground parking, and she wasn't alone. I watched from a side street as Darren's car pulled in right behind her. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white, but I didn't move. Not yet, because this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I sat in my car 2 blocks away from that sleek boutique hotel, watching the hours bleed into one another, watching the world continue to spin while my own tilted further off its axis. At some point, around 2 a.m., I drove home. The house greeted me with its usual, indifferent silence. I showered, changed into sweatpants, and poured myself a drink. No messages from Sabrina. No apology. No nothing. By Sunday morning, my plan had started to take shape. I needed time. I needed information. I needed to set the trap so perfectly that when it snapped shut, there would be no escape. First, I bought a new phone. Something untraceable. Then a new email address. A new identity online. I created a fake persona. Evan Miller, a bored, charming businessman working in another city. I built a social media profile for Evan, layering it with photos and posts designed to make him seem real. I used old vacation pictures from a friend's feed, altered them just enough. Next, I joined the online communities I knew Sabrina frequented. It wasn't hard. She had a handful of guilty pleasures. Fashion forums, local young professional groups, and a book club that mostly just gossiped about anything but books. I crafted Evan's presence carefully. Smart, funny, just enough danger to be intriguing, but polished enough to seem trustworthy. And then I waited. Monday night. She was working late again. I watched her go through the motions, makeup applied with precision, heels clicking purposefully on the tile. I waved her off with a smile, the perfect, clueless husband. The moment she was gone, I logged into Evan's account and posted a few casual comments on the same thread she participated in. I made sure they were clever, made sure they would catch her attention if she saw them. 2 days later, she did. She liked one of Evan's posts. My heart hammered in my chest, not from fear, but from grim satisfaction. Over the next week, Evan and Sabrina became friends. Then messaging buddies. Then something more. Through Evan, I learned her real schedule. I learned where she and Darren went when they weren't playing office games. I learned about the cheap little motel out by the interstate they used when they wanted privacy. I learned about the lies she fed me with the same ease she'd order a latte. And all the while, she had no idea. I documented everything. Text logs, hotel receipts, photos. I wasn't just building a case. I was building a masterpiece. But it wasn't enough. Catching them wasn't enough. Destroying their illusion, making them feel the way I felt, that was a goal. And the first step was making sure Sabrina fell for Evan. Hard. I ramped it up slowly. Flirty messages. Late-night conversations about life and dreams. Evan listened in a way I hadn't lately. Evan understood her like no one else. Evan became her escape. She shared things with Evan she'd never shared with me. It was infuriating. And it was perfect. Then came the night Evan suggested they meet. I typed out the message, my fingers steady on the keyboard. You seem amazing. I'd love to meet you in person. No pressure. Maybe Friday night? I know a cozy place downtown. Sabrina took all of 5 minutes to reply. I'd love that. Finally something to look forward to. Finally, something to look forward to. I sat back, staring at the screen, feeling the icy satisfaction crawl through my veins. She had no idea. The trap was almost ready. The stage was almost set. And when the curtain rose, she'd find out exactly what kind of show she'd sign up for. The week leading up to Friday was almost laughably normal. Sabrina floated around the house, humming while she made coffee, tapping away on her laptop, occasionally tossing a casual, "We should plan a weekend getaway soon." I smiled and nodded, played the role. Inside, the storm was building. I reserved a booth at a dimly lit lounge downtown, one she'd never think to visit with me because it wasn't really our style. I made the reservation under Evan's name, of course. Friday night. I watched her from the hallway window as she pulled out of the driveway, all nerves and excitement barely contained under her cherry red lipstick and little black dress. She thought she was heading toward the man who finally got her. I waited 10 minutes, then grabbed my jacket and left too, my heart pounding with a steady, merciless beat. The lounge was perfect. Low lighting, hushed music, shadowy corners where whispered promises could be made and broken without anyone else noticing. I was already seated in the far back when she walked in. I kept my head down, hidden behind a menu, peering just enough to catch her nervous, anticipatory glances around the room. She didn't recognize me. Not at first. Evan had sent her a text. Corner booth, black jacket, sitting alone. She scanned the room and saw me, the only man matching that description. For a split second, her face lit up, until I looked up from the menu, until she saw me. Her smile froze, then melted away like wax under a blowtorch. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to recalibrate what her brain was screaming at her. I gave her a slow, polite nod, and motioned for her to sit. It was the longest walk of her life, I'm sure. She slid into the booth across from me, hands trembling slightly as she tucked her hair behind her ear. What is this?" she whispered, her voice already cracking. I set the menu down carefully. "You want to meet Evan," I said, voice low and calm. "Congratulations." Her eyes darted around, as if hoping the real Evan would pop out from behind a pillar and shout, "Gotcha." But no one came, only me. I pulled out a manila folder from under the table and slid it toward her. Inside, photos, screenshots, receipts, dates, times, texts. Her whole secret life, laid bare between two flimsy pieces of cardboard. Sabrina didn't open it at first. She just stared at it, like it might bite. "Why?" she finally croaked. I leaned in, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper. "Because you made me spend my birthday alone. Because you lied to my face. Because you thought you could treat me like a fool, and I'd never see it." She swallowed hard, eyes glassy with tears she didn't dare let fall. I sat back, letting the weight of everything press down on her. "But hey," I said with a bitter smile, "happy belated birthday to me." Her hands shook as she finally opened the folder, flipping through the evidence of her betrayal. Every page seemed to strip away another layer of her fake bravado. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It was pathetic, and far, far too late. I stood, dropping a hotel key card on the table next to the folder. "Room 812, I said. "That's where Darren is waiting. I texted him, from your phone, to meet you there." Her mouth opened in horror. "Oh," I added casually, "and just so you know, he thinks you planned this little confession dinner tonight." I let that hang between us for a beat. "Enjoy your evening." And then I walked out, leaving her in that dimly lit lounge, trapped by the mess she had so carefully created. I didn't look back, because the real show was just beginning. Walking out of that lounge felt like shedding a second skin, one that had grown suffocating and toxic. The night air hit me square in the face, cold and bracing, but inside, I burned with something colder, heavier. The kind of resolve that doesn't falter, that only sharpens the closer you get to the end. But what Sabrina didn't know, what she couldn't have even begun to guess, was that this wasn't just about humiliating her. That would be too easy, too obvious. The truth was, I had been preparing for this far longer than she had been lying. I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I parked myself at a coffee shop 2 blocks away, phone in hand, watching the silent messages roll in, first from Darren. "Here, where are you?" Then from Sabrina. "I can't do this. Please don't make me." Followed by another from Darren. "Seriously, what the hell?" The cracks were forming fast now, a building pressure behind a thin wall of lies, and I was about to blow the whole damn thing wide open. A few carefully timed texts from Evan kept the confusion alive, just enough to make Darren angry, just enough to make Sabrina panic. And while they scrambled inside that hotel, trying to stitch together their broken story, I was stitching together something else entirely. You see, I hadn't been idle over these past few months. Sure, I'd noticed the late nights, the sudden mysterious business trips. But I'd also noticed something far more valuable. The money Sabrina had been pulling from our joint accounts. Small withdrawals at first. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Enough to fund hotel rooms, late dinners, little gifts I never received. I traced every transaction, cross-referenced dates and locations. And then I built my masterpiece. 3 weeks ago, I quietly hired a lawyer, one who specialized in marital asset protection, and, more importantly, revenge. Together, we crafted a new will, updated account beneficiaries, and transferred all marital assets into a trust in my name alone. Sabrina, who had been so busy sneaking around, never noticed the legal notices tucked neatly among the bills she never bothered to open. By the time she realized the truth, it would be too late, because tonight wasn't just about revealing her affair. It was about leaving her with nothing. I sent the final message from Evan, hope it was worth it. Then I powered off the burner phone and dropped it into a trash can. Game over. Or so I thought. When I pulled into our driveway, the house loomed like a silent witness. A hollow shell of something that once resembled a home. The lights were still on. Sabrina's car still gone. Perfect. I let myself in, locked the door behind me, and went straight to the study. There, waiting in a neat little stack, were the final papers. Divorce documents, financial disclosures, and a letter I had written carefully over several sleepless nights. Not a letter begging for closure. Not a letter offering forgiveness. A letter of absolution. Of release. Because when you let go of something that tried to destroy you, you don't mourn it. You don't weep over it. You bury it. And move the hell on. I placed a stack of documents on the dining table, where she'd see them the moment she walked in, along with her phone, the real one, and a printed sheet of her messages with Darren. A reminder, a mirror, everything laid bare. No screaming, no confrontation. Just truth. Brutal, inescapable truth. Then I packed. Not just a suitcase, everything. I had spent the past week quietly renting an apartment downtown, a sleek place with dark wood floors and huge windows overlooking the city. A place where the past couldn't reach me. It took less than an hour to load my car. I moved through the house mechanically, stripping it of my presence, my energy, my history. Photos? Gone. Clothes? Gone. Books? Gone. The only thing left behind was the echo of betrayal vibrating between the walls. I stood in the doorway one last time, surveying the wreckage. Not my wreckage. Hers. And then I left. Later that night, as I sat in my new place, a cold beer in hand, My phone buzzed violently across the table. Sabrina. I let it ring. Then again, and again. The messages started pouring in. Were you? Please answer. I can explain. You don't understand. Each one more frantic, more desperate. I took a slow sip of my beer, scrolling through them with detached amusement. Finally, a voicemail notification popped up. I played it on speaker, letting her shaky, broken voice fill the empty apartment. Please, I was stupid, okay? I know I messed up. Just come home. We can fix this. I love you. I stared at the phone for a long moment. Then I deleted the message. No response. No second chances. Only silence. Only freedom. The next day, the real fun began. Because while Sabrina scrambled to find me, to salvage something, she quickly discovered that her financial safety net, the house, the accounts, the car, were all tied to me, and I had already cut the rope. The trust held everything now. The prenup we signed years ago, at her insistence, ironically, to protect her assets, ensured she had no claim to the trust. She couldn't touch a dime. She couldn't even contest it without a mountain of legal fees she couldn't afford. And Darren? Well, Darren had his own issues to deal with. Turns out, I had anonymously forwarded the evidence of their affair to his wife. Yes, Darren was married too. Surprise. Within 24 hours, Darren's world imploded, and so did Sabrina's. I watched from a distance as her perfect little facade crumbled. Friends abandoning her, colleagues whispering, family members taking space. The woman who once thought she could play puppet master over 2 lives was now dangling by the very strings she had pulled. And me? I was free, not broken, not bitter, just free. People say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. It's best served with silence, with no explanation, with nothing but a mirror held up to the monster they created. Let them stare at it. Let them realize what they destroyed. And let them live with it. Forever. Freedom tastes strange at first, sharp, electric, almost bitter, because it's laced with the aftertaste of all the chains you had to break to get there. And that night, sitting alone in my apartment overlooking the city, I realized freedom isn't a blazing sunrise or a victorious march. It's quieter, more personal, more brutal. It's waking up and knowing no one owns even a fraction of you anymore. In the days that followed, I let the dust settle without so much as lifting a finger to sweep it away. I didn't need to. Sabrina was doing a fine enough job scrambling around in the wreckage, trying to piece together a version of the story where she wasn't the villain, texting mutual friends with desperate apologies, painting herself as confused, overwhelmed, only human. But human weakness doesn't account for calculated betrayal. Human weakness doesn't plan secret weekends and weave layers of lies like an artisan crafting lace. Word spread faster than I could have anticipated. The happy couple, who everyone envied, were no more, and not because of some tragic accident, not because life had thrown a cruel twist of fate our way, but because one of them had decided that loyalty was too boring and betrayal was more thrilling. Funny how the world sympathizes with tragedy, but quietly savors scandal. I focus on rebuilding, but not in that cheesy motivational poster kind of way. I wasn't reinventing myself. I wasn't climbing a metaphorical mountain. I was just living, really living, without explaining myself, without asking for permission, without tiptoeing around someone else's insecurities disguised as charm. My day started earlier. I'd rise before dawn, hit the gym when it was still dark outside, where the air smelled like iron and rubber and sweat, real, honest smells, none of that fake sugarcoating that so many people drown themselves in. There was something pure about it, about pushing yourself against weights that didn't lie, didn't cheat, didn't whisper sweet things and stab you in the back. Work improved too, not because anything magical happened, but because I wasn't distracted anymore. I wasn't glued to my phone, second-guessing every working late text, wondering if every client meeting was another excuse. When you remove a cancer, even a benign one, everything functions better, even if the scar tissue it leaves behind aches in the cold. Saturdays were the hardest at first, the time we used to sleeping together, binge stupid TV shows, make pancakes that always ended up slightly burned because we were too busy laughing. But instead of dwelling, I created new rituals. I'd grab a book, a real book, not one of those self-help, discover your inner champion, nonsense tomes, but stories, fiction, adventures, wild tales. Because somewhere along the way I'd forgotten the power of a world that didn't revolve around betrayal and disappointment. There were moments, and I won't lie, when her ghost would drift into my mind. The way her eyes used a crinkle when she laughed, the way her hand would find mine in crowded places, the way she used a hum-off key, while cooking, memory after all, is a con artist specializing in selective editing, smoothing over the ugly parts and polishing the good until you're convinced you lost something pure instead of something poisoned. But when those moments hit, I didn't shove them away. I let them in. I examined them under harsh light until their flaws were too glaring to ignore. The laughter that had started sounding fake months before, the hand-holding that became perfunctory, the humming that stopped altogether when her business trips started stacking up. Forgiveness was never on the table. Not because I'm petty, but because forgiveness implies some debt owed the offender, a transaction of guilt and grace, and I owed her myself. Better than that cheap exchange. No, my revenge wasn't bitterness. It wasn't endless mourning. My revenge was indifference, pure and merciless. The apartment gradually filled with pieces of my new life. Photos from hikes I took alone in places where the air tasted like freedom. Ticket stubs from concerts where music was loud enough to drown out memory. Scraps and notes and odds and ends that made up a man no longer defined by someone else's absence. New faces entered my orbit too. Some friends, some just acquaintances, but all fresh, untainted by the rot that infested my old social circles. People who knew me as me, not as Sabrina's husband, not as a fixture in someone else's story. I started writing again. Nothing dramatic, just small essays, observations, letters never sent. And in those words, I found pieces of myself I thought I'd lost forever. Humor that didn't taste bitter. Hope that didn't feel naive. Anger that had cooled into clarity. I kept tabs on Sabrina only when necessary. For legal purposes mostly. It was through those dry, impersonal updates that I learned she moved out of the house 6 weeks after I left, unable to keep up the payments, drowning in debts she couldn't explain to her family, abandoned by friends who had no use for her once the party ended. Darren, it turned out, had been juggling more than just Sabrina. When his wife filed for divorce, she dragged him through the mud, and by the time the dust settled, he was jobless, broke, and living in a studio apartment on the bad side of town. Poetic justice, if you ask me. Sometimes I wondered if Sabrina ever truly understood the full scope of what she lost. Not the money, not the house, not even me. But the version of herself she could have been if she hadn't chosen cheap thrills over real loyalty. But those musings were rare and fleeting. Passing thoughts brushed aside like autumn leaves caught on a restless wind. Seasons changed. Winter bled into spring. Spring into a blazing, hopeful summer. The city itself seemed different to me. Less like a maze and more like a playground of possibilities. I took day trips to nearby towns, explored art galleries, tried food I couldn't even pronounce, made a complete ass of myself at salsa classes, and laughed about it, really laughed, deep and loud and without apology. I wasn't chasing happiness anymore. I was living in it, piece by messy, beautiful piece. By the time my next birthday rolled around, the scars had healed into tough, unbreakable skin. No sadness, no longing, just a quiet, ferocious pride in having survived, having rebuilt, having walked away from the wreckage without looking back. On that day, I didn't sit around waiting for someone to remember. I took myself out to dinner, a real feast, and raised a glass to the man who stayed, who endured, who fought, and won a war no one else even knew he was fighting. As I sat there, the city lights glittering beyond the window like 1,000 tiny stars, I realized something simple and profound. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destruction or drama or grand gestures. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living so well that their memory can't even touch you, so fully that even if they try to find you again, they'd only see the dust trail you left behind, fading farther and farther into the horizon. And I smiled, not because of what I lost, but because of everything I gained. The birthday I will never forget wasn't about the betrayal anymore. It was about the rebirth. It was about choosing myself fully, unapologetically, fiercely, for the first time in my life. And God, it felt good